my name is Hannah, and today I will be talking about the progress narrative and a little bit about this week's discussion materials and lecture materials and how Clint Smith visited Angola prison. To start off, the progress narrative is essentially this belief that throughout history, and especially in slavery, as time has gone by, things have just gotten better and things have improved. And while this is a very nice and idealized version and concept, this isn't true. And we can kind of go through it in this week's materials and kind of talk about it. And Clint Smith talks about it in his book, especially regarding how he visited Angola prison. So before Angola prison was a prison in the United States, it used to be a plantation. And that meant at one point there were black men working on that plantation under really hard and really brutal conditions. Now that it's been transformed into a prison, when Clint Smith visited, he talked about how he noticed that the incarcerated men were mostly black and how the conditions were just horrible at Anguilla prison. And so that progress narrative is really misleading, especially if you look at it in the lens of what he was trying to say with this part, because it kind of just shows that continuity in progress isn't always guaranteed, and that a lot of times it's conditional, and that it's like fragile, and it's not necessarily that freedom wasn't necessarily like imposed to people at Anguilla prison. So the progress narrative can be really dangerous because it can like blind us to the reality of what's going on in the present, and having this idea of that, oh, things are better than they used to be, can be really misleading and can be really toxic. So how the progress narrative kind of shaped our past, essentially we've talked about how we said it was like the series of improvements, and that just this like positive slope, that things get better, and that's not necessarily true, and it's just very oversimplified. And even though a lot of people think that obviously slavery ended in 1865 in the United States, we can kind of ignore how a lot of times that this free unpaid labor, this harsh labor going on at Anguilla prison, which is like this obviously a grander scheme for mass incarceration throughout the US. And it's easy to kind of ignore this because we just assumed that the worst is already over with slavery. And how it shaped our future is essentially that the progress narrative can give us this really false sense of like comfort, and it makes us really complacent. And if we always have this belief that like society is getting better, we're not going to actually see real change. And if we have this belief all the time that like, oh, things aren't as bad anymore, it kind of makes us ignorant and makes us less likely to see what goes on regarding systemic racism and like economic injustice. So, yeah, I just wanted to clarify that and talk about that. But thank you so much for listening. Bye bye.